I'm sure everyone who has played during Season 1 and 2 all know how the F-Car was the go-to pick for medium. We've seen many changes to the medium weapons throughout the seasons, and we've got to a point where it's pretty difficult to make a concrete decision on what AR for medium is the best. So let's go over the weapons and answer the question of what AR is the best. Let's start with these stats. Comparing all the ARs, we can see where the strengths are in each weapon. For damage per magazine and magazine size, the AKM is the best. Then we have the FAMAS, and the F-Car is the worst in this category. Now for reload time, the F-Car does actually win, followed by the AKM and then the FAMAS. But keep in mind, the AKM has the same reload for an empty mag versus a partially empty mag, whereas the FAMAS does have a better tactical reload time. Now we get to the TTK. The race here is very tight, but when facing light, the F-Car wins, followed by the AKM, and the FAMAS is the worst. When facing mediums, things actually flip quite a bit. FAMAS now is the winner, followed by the AKM, and F-Car loses. Versus heavies, the FAMAS wins yet again, followed by the F-Car this time, and the AKM loses. For this comparison, we can kind of see that the AKM is a good general weapon. Always feels good versus any class. Please keep in mind that even though it is slower when facing heavies, the extra damage per magazine and the clip size is a huge help when facing a heavy. The F-Car is really solid when facing lights, and if you can land your shots, is great against heavies. Overall, I find this weapon is very good if you have the aim to back it up, as the smaller magazine size can be pretty punishing if you don't. The FAMAS is not really ideal when facing lights, especially if you miss a burst, but when facing heavies and other mediums, this thing is very, very good. Also keep in mind the high damage per bullet plus the high fire rate during the burst. Those first 3 bullets are an insane burst, so if you only have a short bit of time, again, the FAMAS does kind of come out on top here. Now for range, we can see the drop-off range is the furthest with the FAMAS. The F-Car followed up, and then the AK end up being the shortest. However, the amount of damage retained at the furthest distance is the worst on the FAMAS with 50% retained. The other 2 ARs are at 55%. This means that at the furthest of ranges, the F-Car is slightly better. The FAMAS will be the best medium range weapon up to a certain point, and then the AKM is obviously best suited for the closer range engagements. However, that 55 damage retention is honestly not that bad, which does match the F-Car, especially at the very, very, very long range. I feel like you can't really go wrong with any of them. The range for ARs feels very fair here. When it comes to most engagements, I would say the FAMAS does win overall, but it isn't a big difference. Before we get into the overall best AR, or at least what is best for you, the best overall thing you can do is subscribing to me. The weapon of knowledge will always win, and my guides are the best. Next thing to cover is the recoil and the sights. As we can see on screen, the recoil pattern for all weapons, the F-Car does feel like one of the more difficult patterns to use. However, the sight is very clear. The AKM has a pretty basic pattern, and if you can learn that just initial pattern, you'll be rewarded with a very easy follow-up pattern. The iron sights are pretty much just a classic for FPS games. I'm sure most of you guys know an AK's iron sights. You either love it or you hate it. Next, the FAMAS, which arguably has the easiest recoil pattern. However, the downside is it is a burst, which is definitely tricky to learn, and those who aren't familiar with burst weapons can struggle with the recoil. The iron sights on the FAMAS honestly are probably the worst of the 3, but really the sights are kind of more a personal preference. But if you can control the burst, I think the FAMAS is the easiest. Now for the ARs, I find the best is actually personal preference or situationally dependent. If you told me the F-Car was still the best, I'd honestly agree, because as we have seen in various scenarios, it just wins. Same goes for all the other weapons. There are scenarios where it wins. So if you are playing to the F-Car's strengths, then yes, it is the best. If I were to wager though, on which weapon would become the top tier pick in a pro setting, if there was like a professional scene with big tournaments and a bunch of money on the line, I'd argue the AKM would actually win. And for me, I personally prefer the FAMAS. As someone who bounces from class to class all the time, I flex between a lot of loadouts, and the FAMAS for me is easy to pick up and use. The AKM and the F-Car require a bit of practice for the recoil to remember it, and considering how many weapons I'm using on like a daily basis, it's really hard for me to just kind of pick up something and instantly know the pattern. It just takes me a couple games to get into it, whereas the FAMAS, it takes no time for me to pick up and just start to feel comfortable. Another reason is the TTK versus mediums and heavies, since those two classes are still the two strongest classes in the game, especially heavy. So I bring the tool that works the best versus the biggest threats. I think there is an argument to be made for all the ARs here, and what feels best for you is what matters most. Or you can use the stats that are in this video to find what suits your playstyle the most, or if you've been struggling with finishing off targets with one clip, you could try the AKM. If you hate the iron sights that you're using, try the FCAR. Or if you're struggling with killing other mediums and heavies as fast as you want to, try the FAMAS. Thank you to all my members. Comment below what you think is the best AR on medium, or what your preference is, however you want to word it. Whether you are bursting or spraying to get kills on medium, keep on shooting, and I will see you in the finals. GG's.
And now we celebrate as one team.
Down now.
It's not pretty.
There we go. Get aggressive.
Yeah. Heavy slow. One light, purple.
Slide just up.
One light.
A successful kingfishing expedition in the arena as they steal a cash out. Reloading.
Red's pulling up. Red's pulling up.
There he
The
does.
kingfish just made a move to the
Medium on me, not hurt. And light.
I can get out. Oh, maybe down. Oop.
tide rolls in.
That's a team.
Waves of competition commence. A light being taken out of the by the mighty. The Hunters are squeezing into vault two.
One med.
Leading through opponents.
He defibbed.